Welcome everybody to the Cover 2 podcast, first podcast of 2019. I'm Nick Nenad.
I'm Jared Smith.
And Jared, we have a football-packed show today, and it's all important. We have to talk about all of it. We're going to have an extra segment today, just because we have so much to talk about. Just to give you an idea, we have the biggest game in college football was this past Monday, so we will talk about that a little bit later. We also have NFL head coaching announcements. We have 3 coaches as of Wednesday, today, the day we're recording. So we will talk about them. And then also we are going to start the show right now discussing the playoffs in the NFL. Obviously, we had the wild card this weekend. We'll talk about the divisional round and do our predictions a lot later in the show. But for now, we're going to talk about last week's games. Jared, these games, I mean, we obviously were kind of joking around on Twitter. We picked the exact opposite teams to win each game. And that is because we both thought that all those teams could have won. And I could have picked those teams, too, that you picked. But, you know, it was a very interesting weekend. Only one blowout, per se, the Colts and the Texans. The score doesn't necessarily show that, but that was a blowout in my mind. And then you had great games, Cowboys, Seahawks, Eagles, Bears, and Chargers, Ravens. So, Jared, what were your thoughts on the whole weekend? And if you want to get the Cowboys cheering out of the way since they got a big win, go ahead right now before we kind of get into the full analysis.
Oh, yeah. No. As you can see, I'm glowing right now. You know? I mean, listen, my Cowboys are doing well. They are moving on and playing the Rams this week, and we will get into that matchup a little later on. So I will kind of hold off on my celebration for the Cowboys because they still have a lot of work to do and a big-time opponent coming up. Really, I picked all of the home teams to win, and I went 1-3. Nick, if you follow us on Twitter, Nick picked all the away teams, and I was a little surprised by that, but actually Nick obviously did a lot better. Really, in my opinion, I think the only game that I would have flipped, like going back in time, would have been the Colts-Texans. The Colts are hot right now.
Yeah, they're very good.
Andrew Luck is proving that, you know, the Colts made the right decision by sticking with him through that shoulder injury and giving him time to rest because, as we can see now, he is completely healthy. And yes, granted, their offensive line is better. He's not getting sacked. And their defense has come out of nowhere to be very, very good.
Yeah, surprising.
But at the end of the day, Andrew Luck is leading this team. And like I said, he's proving not only that he was worth that number 1 overall pick, but he's proving that he's one of the best young quarterbacks in the NFL. So the Colts, you're right. It was 21-7, so not necessarily a blowout, but really the Colts had control of that game from the get-go.
Yeah.
So the Texans were completely flat, no momentum. Deshaun Watson looked just like a shell of himself. And that Texans defense with, you would think, J.J. Watt, Jadeveon Clowney, all the stars on that defense, and really, they got picked apart.
Yeah, they did.
I mean,
Clowney made a couple plays in that game, a couple of his typical, but like Watt, 0 sacks.
Yeah,
not much in the game.
The Texans could not get off the field on third down. It was either a conversion on third down by the Colts offense or a penalty by the Texans defense that would give the Colts another opportunity. I mean, I'm not sitting here and putting all the blame on the on the Texans defense because obviously that offense was not able to score enough
especially
points.
in the first half too.
Right, yeah. But like for the defense, I mean, they didn't come to play. I mean, I think it was as simple as that. Just very quickly, so that was probably, you know, the biggest shock to me was the fact that the Texans really just didn't show up at home too. You know what I mean? Yeah, it's like you get a home playoff game, the crowd is behind you, they're fired up, and you come out and you basically throw up a dud.
Yeah. I mean, it was very interesting, this game, because I was super excited because the prospect of this matchup was great defensive line versus great offensive line. There was going to be some plays from the Texans' offensive line, and then there was going to be 30-yard plays because the offensive line for the Colts is very, very good, top 5 in the league. So that didn't end up happening. It was more the Colts just dominated. There was a couple plays here and there by Clowney because he's just a monster, but besides that, I mean, it was the first half, I believe it was 21-0, and it should have been even more than that, but the Colts kind of screwed up their possession at the end of the half. Texans obviously get a touchdown, but it really was never that close. Watson, again, in a big game, didn't make the plays, made some mistakes. I still think he's a little hoppy in the pocket. I just think he's not necessarily always looking to pass, and I think in the NFL you have to look to pass first and then run. And I think Watson almost immediately is thinking run still, and he just needs to change it. And there's a couple of good plays where he was able to get out of the pocket and make passes and stuff like that, but just not enough. And he made, and I'm trying to remember some of the exact plays, because this was the first game of the whole weekend, and we've been kind of footballed out this past weekend with some of these games. But it just seemed like you look at Luck and you look at Deshaun Watson, and there's a lot of room for Deshaun Watson to get there, because Luck is at the top of his game, almost like he never got hurt. And this Colts team is dangerous, and they move on to play the Chiefs. We'll talk about that later. But yeah, I was just surprised, and it almost gave me more faith in the Colts that they can possibly make a little bit of a run here.
I will give the Colts defense a lot of credit for this. I'm looking at the stats right now. Lamar Miller, the Texans starting running back, was their second leading receiver, ahead of DeAndre Hopkins. DeAndre Hopkins had 5 receptions for 37 yards. His longest catch was 13 yards.
He did get hurt, though, yeah.
He did get hurt. I believe he did come back into the game. But still, for that Texans defense to hold DeAndre Hopkins in a playoff game to 5 receptions for 37 yards, when he goes off for 10 receptions for over 100 yards and a touchdown, it's almost like a double-double in the NBA where a guy gets 10 points and 10 rebounds. It's like he's almost a lock to get that much, right? So for the Colts to hold him and basically force Deshaun Watson to look to other receivers. Now let's remember, they don't have Demaryius Thomas, right? They don't have Will Fuller, right? So they lost a lot of their other kind of key components. So they were relying on, like I said, Lamar Miller, Alfred Blue, and then Cootie. Am I saying that correctly?
Yeah, but here's the thing, though. Demaryius Thomas wasn't on the Texans the majority of the year. He either was on the Broncos or he was injured.
No, what I'm saying is...
And same with Will Fuller.
He can still be a factor if he's healthy.
Correct.
So
and that was
if he were on the field, I'm pretty sure Lamar Miller wouldn't have 8 catches for 63 yards.
Lamar Miller,
right?
Here's the thing about Lamar Miller, too. I thought this was Lamar Miller's best year in a while. He looked quick. He just looked better than he always did. And they just was completely wasted in this game because they went down 21-0. And part of the Texans' offense this year was that improved run game. Alfred Blue, Lamar Miller finally stepped up, helped out Deshaun Watson. It's why they were 11-5. But you know what? The Colts were 1 game behind them. And I think that's why a lot of people jumped on that Texans bandwagon for this game, because they looked at it, the Texans were 0-3 and won a ton of games, and they were pretty balanced and stuff like that, and their defense is great. Well, the Colts were 1-5, and they did the exact same thing. So this was and the Colts, in my opinion, looked better. I mean, they beat your Cowboys 23-0 in a game. They continually beat up opponents that they shouldn't have beat up. So I was extremely impressed with the Colts, but the Texans they have some improvements they have to make, because their defense did not look good in this game. And I think when your stars don't play well and you sign guys like Tyrann Mathieu, who, by the way, I said was not the best, and Tyrann Mathieu got beat on plays over and over again and was missing tackles. When you spend money on guys, they have to make the plays in these type of games. It doesn't matter what they do in regular season, per se. So I thought the Texans' defense was the reason I think they ended up losing this game.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Yeah. And you were right on that Tyrann Mathieu pick. I remember you saying that, I believe, before the season even started, and I was a little hesitant. I think you were kind of salty.
Oh, yeah, I was.
Because the Cardinals kind of...
I was, but I watched tape. That's the difference is I watched tape, and with the Cardinals, it's kind of like we talk about Sam Bradford, right? With he's scared to get hit in the pocket. Tyrann Mathieu's he's scared to hit. He's scared to tear that ACL again, it seems like. And so because he's done it twice, I don't blame him. But that's not a guy you're going to give millions and millions of dollars to when he's getting beat and he's getting run over on plays, and it's just it didn't look good. And he's one of your top paid players, and of course J.J. Watt didn't do anything either. And Jadeveon Clowney didn't do enough to get the win. So I was disappointed in them, but the Colts' game plan was also fantastic in this game too.
It was. Let's move on to that other AFC matchup. The Chargers going into Baltimore and beating Lamar Jackson, the youngest rookie at 21 years of age to ever start a playoff game.
Absolutely.
And the Chargers pull off the 23-17 victory. Nick also correctly picked this game as the Chargers won. Nick, I want to get your thoughts on this game and what you think about the Chargers going forward.
Yeah, this was a very fun game to watch because Lamar Jackson, you had the saga of will Joe Flacco come in, right? Because Lamar Jackson was just playing awful. I mean, he was just fumbling the ball on his own. He was flustered. He looked like a college quarterback in an NFL game. I don't blame him. Like you said, he's 21, 22 now, but he was 21 when the game started. And in my opinion, in this game, obviously the Chargers ended up winning. They did enough, but I did think that just for this one game, Joe Flacco should have come in at least after halftime, because I thought that you could still play Lamar Jackson the next game, but you got to get the win. This is not the regular season where you can figure it out later. You can figure it out later. And I think, John Harbaugh made an executive decision to stick with Lamar Jackson and go with the future. And I've heard now that John Harbaugh is in contract extension talks with the Ravens. So I think that whole he's leaving thing is behind you. And I think with that decision, keeping Lamar Jackson in, that definitely helped the case. But I just don't agree with that. I think you win every game you possibly can with whoever you can. And Lamar Jackson was not the guy. I know he brought them back, later, but the Chargers are playing prevent defense, and they did enough to end up winning the game. So I thought Flacco should have came in. As far as the Chargers concerned, I thought they should have scored more in this game. I know the Ravens' defense was fantastic, but the Chargers did miss on some opportunities. But they made the big plays, and they made enough plays and wasted enough of the clock to end up winning this game, and that's all you need to do. And to be honest, they faced a similar offense in the Patriots the next game. So I think if they can stick to that game plan and keep doing what they're doing, they can continue to win. But there are improvements to be made for the Chargers. And Jared, I now want to get your take on the whole Flacco-Lamar Jackson situation during this game. Do you think Lamar Jackson deserved to stay in this game, or did you see a switch?
So you bring up a good point about Harbaugh and his contract extension.
Uh-huh.
I think the Ravens were in a predicament because it's like, okay, we understand that Jackson is not playing well. The Chargers kind of have our number right now. But if you take Lamar Jackson out of this game and you put Joe Flacco in, what is that going to do to Lamar Jackson's confidence, number one? And number two, going into next season, are you telling Lamar Jackson that, you're kind of on a short leash? Or because I think what they did by keeping him in this game the entire game, obviously we know they lost, right?
Yes.
I think what Harbaugh was saying is, we're sticking with you. You are our guy no matter what, whether we win or lose. And so I think it's tough to see right now if you're a Baltimore Ravens fan, but I think what they were doing is showing complete confidence in Jackson and saying, going into next season and beyond, we drafted you in the first round for a reason, right? Now, obviously, there's a lot of things that you need to work on, but as far as throwing the ball, we know all about your running ability and that type of thing. But I think what they were saying is, you are our guy. We don't want to lose any type of confidence in you going into this offseason and into next year. And I think that's why they kept him. Another point why I think they kept Jackson in, it is a completely, and I don't think it's any question about this, a completely different offense when Lamar Jackson's in the game as compared to Joe Flacco.
Oh, absolutely.
So for the last 7-8 weeks of the season, when Jackson's been in the game plan has been read option, RPOs, all, you know what I mean? Basically a college spread offense.
Yeah.
So if you were to bring Joe Flacco into the game, these players are going to have to adjust and go back to a more pro-style system, which they're known to do, but they haven't practiced for 7 or 8 weeks, right? And you're expecting them to do that on the fly at home in a playoff game. That's a little tough. Yeah. So I think from that perspective as well, they didn't want to necessarily change their whole game plan that they've been working on for the entire week. And I think that's another reason why they stuck with Lamar.
And my thing is just, you got to try to win the game. And I just thought that the Ravens, they made the decision to go with the future success over the... But you have a fantastic defense. You could have got through this game. And I get it. It hurt Lamar Jackson's confidence. But I'm saying play him the next game. I'm not saying Flacco starts the next game. I'm saying sometimes you need help. Ask Jalen Hurts, right? Jalen Hurts has Tua come into the game in the biggest game of the year. And this is the national championship game last year. Tua wins the game. Jalen Hurts comes in the next year and makes the plays in the game where Tua gets hurt. Right now, it's a different situation because they didn't pull Tua. Tua did have a bad game in that case, and it did have his ankle issues. But I see it like that. If Saban can make that decision in the national championship game, why can't John Harbaugh make that decision in a wild card playoff game? Right. So I know college is different, and the defenses are not as good, and the Chargers defense is fantastic. Melvin Ingram dominated in this game and stuff like that. But I just thought, especially after halftime when there was no movement, and even that first drive after halftime, nothing happened again. I thought there needed to be a change. I thought potentially if you have more passing, that the Chargers defense wouldn't be able to adjust quick enough, and Flacco might have actually been able to tie or win that game, being able to go down the field that whole half. I think you get that extra drive. I think the Chargers defense started to get a little bit more depleted and stuff like that. And I thought that Flacco gave them the best chance to win.
I was just looking over the stats. Yeah. Another kind of play for Jackson. I actually have to put a little bit of blame, well, not a little bit, a lot of blame on the Ravens offensive coordinator and the play calling because in the first half, Lamar Jackson threw for less than 50 yards.
Yeah.
He ended the game with 194 yards passing, 2 touchdowns, and 1 interception. So you're telling me that in the second half, all of a sudden, Lamar Jackson had like over 150 yards?
That's 300 times the yards he had in the first half.
So why were they not trying to throw the ball a little bit more in the first half when obviously we know that's not his strength, right? He's not Tom Brady that's going to sit back here and throw the ball 50 times. But he's shown that he can throw the ball. So why would they not kind of give him a couple more passes in the first half, or you know what I mean? Because it's like all of a sudden, the Ravens crept back in the second half, especially in the fourth quarter with 2 touchdowns, and made this a ball game. And Lamar Jackson proved that he can throw the ball on teams. So I kind of put some blame there that why would you guys continue to run the ball with this RPO and expect Jackson to make plays with his legs when the Chargers... I believe this is like the first time this has happened, not only in playoff history, but in NFL history, where the Chargers had 7 defensive backs on the field, which means they had 7 either corners or safeties or a combination of both on the field for more than 50% of their defensive snaps.
That's insane.
Which has never been done in NFL history. And it was like a very, very smart move by the Chargers defensive coordinator to do that, to put speed on the field. Right? It's one thing to get big guys on there and defensive linemen and linebackers, but Lamar Jackson can outrun those guys. So you put 7 fast guys on defense, Lamar Jackson isn't running away from 7 fast guys.
No, I agree with that. And I thought that, the defensive strategy from the Chargers was fantastic. And you're right. I do agree with you. If they would have passed with Lamar Jackson more, I think, because that creates the threat of him running as well, because when you have a running play set up, the box is set up for a run. I get there's RPOs and stuff like that, but I don't think they trusted that Lamar could even throw the ball anywhere. So the defense is just sitting there ready for him to run. On a pass, though, you have to cover the receivers. You can't let them wide open. I mean, Lamar Jackson's going to hit wide open receivers, so that gives him the chance, even with fast defenders, to be able to run and get around edges and get around people if the pocket breaks down. And I thought a little more passing would have helped him out, but because they weren't using that strategy, I thought put Flacco in. He's a natural passer. He can do it without, needing a crazy scheme. Flacco's proved he's won a Super Bowl before. So, and it's not like Joe Flacco. He's won a Super Bowl before. It's not like he's any slouch. But, in the end, the Chargers get the win. The Ravens' game plan wasn't correct. The Chargers' game plan was almost perfect on defense. The offense did enough to win. And the Chargers deserve to move on. I think that's what the whole case of this is the Chargers won a football game. And we can talk about this forever, but Lamar Jackson is a better case than Joe Flacco for the near future, obviously. So I think it's all said and done. Chargers get the win, and we move on. All right, let's talk about Eagles and Bears. This was another defensive, slower game, a lot like the Chargers and Ravens. Two similar games on Sunday with a lot of defense and a lot of clock wasting. Jared, what did you see from this game? Obviously, we have the missed field goal controversy, the tip ball, all that stuff. We don't even necessarily need to talk about that because I think it's a little comical to be joking about the kicker and stuff like that when his kick gets blocked. What did you see from this entire game, though? Let's just ask this. Why didn't the Bears win this game?
The Bears didn't do enough offensively. And whether you want to give more credit to the Eagles' defense or say that the Bears collectively did not get the job done enough. I mean, listen, Trubisky threw for over 300 yards, did not turn the ball over. Allen Robinson finally showed up, right? This was a statement game for him because the Bears got him in free agency this past offseason, paid him a lot of money. 10 receptions, 143 yards, and a touchdown. That's the Allen Robinson that we are used to seeing from his days in Jacksonville. But really, I mean, listen, the Bears defense gave up 16 points. That should be plenty enough to win a game, right? The Bears offense is good enough to score more than 16 points. So really, I'm putting the blame more so on the Bears offense as opposed to giving the Eagles defense credit. Now, the Eagles played very well, right? And we know that they have a good defense. But the thing is, the Eagles are still playing with like their second and third string guys in the secondary because they're so banged up. So the fact that the Bears were not able to exploit that matchup and make more plays in the passing game, to me, it says it all. Now, you can say, right, at the end of the game that the field goal that many people thought was just missed came back after being reviewed, and the NFL said it was actually blocked. So you can blame it on that. You can say that the Eagles and Nick Foles and all that magic and all that stuff, but really, I'm focusing on this Bears offense with Nagy and Trubisky and all of the hype that they had going into this game and the whole season, right? These guys are being innovative. They're using their players in different formations and these creative ways. Well, I didn't see enough of it. And to only score 15 points at home, I think they came up short in that aspect.
Yeah, but what's interesting about this, too, because leading into this game, they were the most favored team of all the 4 playoff games. I think it was by a touchdown or something close to that. And I was like, really? You guys think the Bears are going to win by a touchdown? I mean, this seems a little ridiculous. The Bears offense, I looked it up. In their last 4 games before the regular season, they'd averaged 19 points per game, and some of their opponents were not that good. It's almost like the Bears' offense got worse as the year went on. And as we saw, and I made these comments when this happened, that Rams-Bears Sunday Night Football game, not only did Jared Goff disappoint, but even in a win, Trubisky did not play well. And I said against good teams, if you look at it, I think there was one game where he played well at like 5 of them. Trubisky did not step up. He had around 200 yards. Turnovers, not that many touchdowns. He did use his legs a couple times, but it didn't look impressive enough to win. And he did the exact same thing. I mean, you could probably pull up the stats there. I didn't write the exact stats down, but they weren't good, right? It's not anything impressive. And Trubisky did make some very impressive throws. And obviously the Bears should have won because they had the field goal at the end. But the Bears literally got to their average of points. You're not going to win a Super Bowl averaging 19 points per game. That's just not happening. And I said before the game, if the Eagles can get 3 scores in this game, they're going to have a chance because the Bears can't score. And I was saying that the Eagles score 3 touchdowns, they would have won, and they would have won anyways. So this was, you're right, disappointing of the Bears offense, but it was kind of what they were doing before they win the game, and that's one of the reasons I picked them. I didn't necessarily I thought the Eagles actually could have won this game easier because the Bears offense did not play well. Foles made some terrible throws in this game, which he needs to change if they want to beat the Saints. But, Foles did enough, and obviously the Bears should have won this game with a field goal. But, yeah, this Trubisky's going to need to make a bigger step next year in the offensive game in order to make this Bears team a legitimate contender.
Think about this. Yeah. I just kind of got this in my head a little bit. If you're the Bears right now, I'm going back, I'm backtracking a little bit, but just kind of bear with me and try to stick along. The Bears, in the last week of the regular season, went to Minnesota, right? And Minnesota was playing for its playoff life. Yeah. Minnesota had to win to get in. That's all they had to do. They had to beat the Bears to get in, right? The Bears decided to play their starters the majority of the game and ended up beating Minnesota to potentially kick Minnesota out of the playoffs. The Eagles not only had to beat the Redskins, but they also needed Minnesota to lose, right? Yeah. So Chicago, in a sense, killed their own fate because they could have played Minnesota at home, a team that they are more familiar with and a team that I'm sure they're very confident in beating, right? So because the Bears did not pull their starters and decide to just quote-unquote tank for that game, they ended up playing their starters the majority of the game. They beat Minnesota. The Eagles beat the Redskins. Therefore, the Eagles made it into the playoffs. First of all, how crazy is that for the Eagles? Because going into that week, we were like, there's no way, right? Minnesota, like, Chicago's going to rest their starters. Minnesota has the home game. They're going to be more amped. We think they're going to win that game. Even if the Eagles win, they need so much help. There's no way, right? Look how the cards turned out. And now the Bears are going home. So I think it's just kind of interesting. You know what I mean? It's like, do you kind of go back and say, wow, maybe the Bears should have lost that game, but on purpose in order to play Minnesota at home because the Bears were going to have a home game regardless.
Yeah.
And so it's like, do you prefer to go up against a team for the third time who's a division opponent who you know very well, or go up against a team that you haven't played all year? And even though they may not be as good, or maybe they're equal to the Vikings, they're playing with a backup quarterback, and they were very lucky to get into the playoffs. So I think it's just very interesting how this all has played out so far.
That's a rookie head coach. Bill Belichick's sitting everybody, right? Bill Belichick's sitting everybody for that game because, and you're right, the Vikings were a clear worst team to play in the sense of that you have an easier opponent, right? Why the hell would you want to play the Eagles, who are the defending Super Bowl champions, and look like that again? Right? They didn't look like that the whole season. They put Nick Foles in. Why would you ever test your fate against Nick Foles? I mean, we saw it. The 4th and goal play, absolutely picture-perfect pass from Nick Foles, right? To get the touchdown and to get the win. Now, I know, like I said, the Bears should have won. They should have made that field goal. But Nick Foles made the plays in the end. The Bears didn't. And that's why Kirk Cousins wouldn't have made the plays. Kirk Cousins getting paid $28 million to throw under 100 yards against the Bears. Under 100 yards, Jared. So, you have a very good point there. And that's a rookie head coach making a mistake and not realizing that you already have the 3rd seed locked up. I think they also, in this game, what we're forgetting to say, too, is they were trying to get the 2nd seed, but the Rams were up like 75-0 in the first quarter.
Right.
So they should have got note in the first or second quarter from somebody up top saying, the Rams are the 2nd seed, this game doesn't matter anymore, and we can choose our opponent. And they should have done that. I'm sure the league doesn't want them doing that. But us at home, we're like, just take everybody out.
That's what I was saying. Yeah. I was kind of flipping back and forth, and I'm like, why are the Bears starters still in this game?
Yeah.
I mean, the Rams are clearly winning. There's no reason why the Rams. I mean, if one of the Bears players got injured in that game, and in what turned out to be a meaningless game, right? We would have all blasted Nagy and anyone else on that coaching staff. So, yeah, I think that's something that the Bears have to think about moving forward is they didn't necessarily play the cards right as far as, like I said, it doesn't happen often when you get to, in a sense, choose your playoff opponent.
I agree, yeah.
And the Bears kind of had a say in who they got to play. They picked the Eagles, and it backfired.
Yeah, no, it did. And what's interesting is that you talk about injuries possibly. Trey Burton didn't play in this game. And I don't know if that was an injury that was caused in practice or against the Vikings, but Trey Burton probably isn't in that game anymore if they take starters out. And you didn't have one of your offensive weapons. Eddie Jackson went into that game not fully healthy either, so you have a point there. They probably should have took some guys out and, picked your opponent, because the Vikings, if you're going to beat their ass at home, excuse my language, but if you're going to beat them at home and Kirk Cousins plays that bad, what are you going to do to them on your own home turf? Now, Jared, we actually do have to go to break because we're long, but we were going to talk about Cowboys and Seahawks at the beginning of the next segment, and then we'll go to the national championship, because I definitely want to talk about. But there's just too much good stuff to talk about. So we'll have the Cowboys celebration on the other side of the break. This is the Cover 2 podcast on OC Rock Radio.
Third throw in 3 plays. It's intercepted, and the Tigers are going the other way. A.J. Terrell They bring 5. Lawrence picks up the blitz, delivers, and is that another circus catch by Ross? Wow! Humongous play by the freshman.
Well, a great throw and an unbelievable right-handed catch. Are you kidding me? A palm, and then he gets the right foot down. That's as good of a catch as you're going to see. Not everybody has the talent that Clemson has, but you can come up with some of the scheme. Brent Venables should get a game ball. We're talking about all these players. Dabo deserves it, but boy, that defense came prepared and outplayed Alabama for 60 minutes.
There's a reason why Venables makes more than $2 million a year, and he's showing you that tonight. One more first down, and this will end deep in Tide territory with very likely a victory formation and a 55th win for this Clemson senior class. The Tigers reclaim their crown by crushing Alabama.
We are back here on the Cover 2 podcast. And before we get to the college football championship game, I know that I wanted to. We have to talk about the Cowboys for a second.
Oh no, of course you do. Yeah.
I was holding out a little bit, right? I wanted to get through the other games first, but of course there is no way we are getting through this show without talking about that Cowboys victory against the Seahawks. So I'm going to start this one off, and then I will let Nick give his thoughts. I think this was one of the closer matchups going into the wild card weekend as far as the Cowboys and the Seahawks being evenly matched on both sides of the ball. Now, obviously, Russell Wilson is a better quarterback than Dak Prescott, but offensively, both of these teams like to run the football, like to control the clock, and they both have very good defenses. And the Cowboys were able to squeak out a win in the end. It looked like they were going to win a little more handily, and then Russell Wilson came back and they were able to score a late touchdown. But really, for me, this game was about the Cowboys' defense, and the Cowboys' defense seems to be getting stronger and stronger as the weeks go on. We know this defensive line, led by DeMarcus Lawrence, is able to get to the quarterback and get sacks and at the very least put pressure on opposing quarterbacks. And this linebacker duo of Jalen Smith and Leighton Vander Esch is becoming one of the strongest linebacker units in the NFL. And I have zero hesitation saying that, even though Leighton Vander Esch is a rookie and Jalen Smith is coming off of that horrific knee injury when many people doubted that he would ever step on the football field again. So, the fact that Sean Lee, their Pro Bowl linebacker, who obviously has been, nicked up with hamstring injuries, but when on the field has been one of the best linebackers in the NFL, he's now been kind of sent to bench duty and coming in just very sparingly. I think he only played like 4 defensive snaps, and that was because Jason Garrett came out and said it was the way that the game was flowing. The Cowboys were able to get 3 and outs and not let the Seahawks sustain long drives. So Sean Lee just didn't really get that many reps. But like I said, I think this was a defensive matchup, and this Cowboys defense will continue to go as far, this Cowboys team as a whole will continue to go as far as this defense will carry them.
Yeah, no, this Cowboys Seahawks game was interesting because when I got into this game and started going over the predictions, I said Dak was going to be the reason. I've said this a lot. Dak was going to be the reason whether the Cowboys won or not, and Dak was the reason whether the Cowboys won or not. He did make the big plays in the end. He had that incredible run at the end where he almost scored the touchdown, which ended up leading to the game-winning touchdown. He made other throws. He didn't make too many mistakes in this game. I thought he could have played better. I thought he kept Seattle in the game where Seattle's offense really was not doing well. But Dak did enough to win the game, and credit Dak Prescott. Now, a lot of people on Twitter gave me flack because I did say Russell Wilson still did play better than Dak Prescott in this game, just wasn't on the field enough. And if you look at the way the game would have progressed, Russell Wilson probably should have had the last chance in this game, but because of a couple Seattle penalties on defense and then that run where they missed tackles on Dak, the Cowboys were able to score that touchdown. And that is due to Dak's run and willingness to get first downs. But I give credit to Dak Prescott and the rest of the Cowboys offense because they did enough to win. I just said that about the Eagles. it's the same thing. It doesn't matter in the playoffs whether you win by 50 or you win by 2. A win is a win, and you move on to the next round. The Cowboys win by 2 here and get this win. They really won by more than that. The Seahawks got a lucky pass at the end where Tyler Lockett got past the defenders. But, this was impressive by the Cowboys. I'll give my more formal prediction on their game against the Rams. I have a lot to say about that game because that's a great matchup. It's very interesting with two quarterbacks that necessarily aren't the leaders of their teams to see what goes on there. But good win. The Seahawks have vowed that they're going to be a threat in the future. I don't necessarily know about that. I think that's a little bluster talking about. I think they thought they should have won this game. But the Cowboys' game plan was fantastic. Their defense is just... they're monsters. I mean, they stopped the Seahawks run all game long. I think the leading rusher had less than 50 yards for Seattle. So that's fantastic for the number one rushing offense to only have their leader be 50 yards. I thought that was extremely impressive. So credit the Cowboys. Great win, and we'll see what they do against the Rams. I'll give my prediction later, and Jared will too. But any last parting words? This is your team. Big playoff win. This doesn't happen a lot. So any other words about the team and just what you're looking forward to?
Right. No, like I said, it was a great win. The defense, led this team, and the offense did enough. It's just, it's nice as a Cowboys fan to see this team playing well. Seeing this defense play well and see the offense, we know that Ezekiel Elliott is the main focal point. But the fact that they now have Amari Cooper, Michael Gallup is playing well, and Dak Prescott, listen, he's not going to make all the throws, but when you need him the most, whether it's throwing the ball or using his legs, like Nick mentioned in that fourth quarter when he had that nice long run that almost resulted in a touchdown, he is cool, calm, and collected, and he's able to make the big plays. So that's what I like to see, is that he's not afraid of the moment. And heading into LA, I'm excited and very confident about what this team will do going forward.
Speaking of confident, there's a team that plays college football that should be as confident as ever after Monday night's blowout, which we never thought would happen. The Clemson Tigers were moving to college football here. The Clemson Tigers claimed their second national championship in 3 years against the Alabama Crimson Tide. Final score 44-16.
44-16?
44-16, wow. Jared. You heard that right. This is the first time this has ever happened to this Nick Saban Alabama team since they started this dynasty. Total butt cooking by Clemson. Just a couple things here. Coming into the game, Clemson had no Dexter Lawrence for the second straight game. He was one of their NFL prospect top defensive linemen, along with Jordan Wilkins and I'm forgetting number 99's name. I'll look it up in a second, get you his name. But so that they were missing them. Going into the game, you were thinking Trevor Lawrence versus Tua Tagovailoa. Tua, obviously, with more experience in the big games, the national championship win last year. Trevor Lawrence, they're undefeated, but they haven't played that true opponent like Alabama. How is he going to play? And, of course, the defenses were both fantastic coming into this game. So how do we get 44-16 out of this, Jared? Trevor Lawrence played unreal. 3 touchdowns, 0 turnovers. Probably one of the best performances ever by a true freshman in a game like this. And Tua Tagovailoa, 2 interceptions that turned into 2 Clemson touchdowns. One literally in a pick six, and the other one leading to a drive that ended up in a touchdown. Alabama also had the worst fake field goal of all time in this game. I still don't understand that. That as well as the Seahawks onside kick attempt against the Cowboys, which we didn't talk about for some reason. I don't know where that comes from, and I think people need to be fired after those kind of decisions. And then also a horrible 4th down conversion play near the end zone, a call to have Tua run. Could have led to more points for Alabama and would have took more points off the board for Clemson. So, long story short, Alabama had a chance to be in this game and win, but they made all the plays not to be. And Clemson took advantage and pretty much played lights out, mistake free, and that's how you win a championship. So, Absolute credit to Trevor Lawrence, Justin Ross, who had a lot of yards receiving, one-handed catches left and right on the field. The defense played like I thought they would play, enough to win. I did not expect this to be a blowout. I did pick the game right with Clemson, but I did not expect this to be a blowout. So I'm not really taking full credit on this game. Clemson gets the win, and Jared. So Jared, what are your thoughts? This is surprising to me, but if you look back at the facts and the stats of the game, Alabama did have a chance, but they made every mistake not to have a chance.
I picked Alabama to win this game. So the fact that Alabama got blown out, like when was the last time in the Nick Saban era
No, it never happened.
Have heard this the saying Alabama got blown out? Never happened.
0.
Alabama's worst loss under the Nick Saban era since he became head coach in 2007 was 14 points, and they doubled that on Monday. I'm almost speechless. And I say almost because we've had a couple days now to kind of sit and marinate this and digest all of this. There's so many storylines. I mean, first of all, Trevor Lawrence, only the second true freshman to ever win the national championship, the first since 1985. And I forget the gentleman's name, but it was for Oklahoma, I believe. But I mean, listen, you're going up against an Alabama defense that may not have been, one of the best Alabama defenses under Nick Saban, but still, it's an Alabama defense, and you as a true freshman put up 347 yards with 3 touchdowns and 0 turnovers? I mean, the kid is looking like, I believe Colin Cowherd came out on Tuesday morning and said there have been like 3 surefire like first round draft picks in his over the time that he's been like a part of the NFL draft. Yeah. I forget who the first is. I know Andrew Luck was one of them, and he said without a doubt Trevor Lawrence is the third. I mean, Trevor Lawrence is already being talked about. Like, basically, if Trevor Lawrence was eligible to be in the draft this year, I'm pretty sure he would.
Well,
he would be like the number 1 pick. He would be above Dwayne Haskins, who is a very, very good quarterback for Ohio State. So Trevor Lawrence gets all the credit in the world for not buckling under the pressure, right? I mean,
Absolutely.
True freshman. He was just in high school last year, and now you are on the biggest stage in the college football championship game against Alabama, the powerhouse who doesn't lose, who's 14-0, looking to go 15-0 and be the first team since the college football playoff to go undefeated. And Trevor Lawrence comes out and just says, so? like what? And we're Clemson, right? And so that is one storyline. The second storyline is I want to give the Clemson defense and their coordinator a ton of credit. The way that they were able to basically make Tua uncomfortable.
Yep,
right?
that's true.
Tua was, going through his progressions, but he was uncomfortable in the pocket. Now, he can use his legs to run, and we've seen that throughout the year. But this year, as opposed to, going from his first read to his second read and then potentially running, he was having to speed up the process and basically be running on eggshells. This Clemson defensive line, we know how great they are, and they were putting tons of pressure on him. So I want to give a lot of credit to that Clemson defense because they showed up and were a main reason why they won. The third storyline in this game was Nick Saban.
Yeah.
And this is the first time I think that anyone, that we have ever been able to say this about Nick Saban since he's been at Alabama. Number one, he got out-coached. Number two, I think he lost his edge a little bit. And you brought it up, the worst fake field goal, and not only college football history, but how about just like football history in general? Yeah. First of all, if you look at the play, Clemson was not fooled at all. Clemson
they had a 4-3 defense.
They kept their starting defense on the field.
They had
right?
a 4-3 defense set
so
up.
If you're Alabama and you're Nick Saban and you're the special teams coach, how do you not either call a timeout or wave some type of signal that says kick the ball?
Yeah, no,
that to me it makes zero sense. From that point on, I said Alabama has no chance. Now they were already down. I think they were down by double digits already, and they had a better chance of coming back into the game because there was still a whole nother quarter to play. But when that moment happened, I immediately said, this game's over. Alabama and Nick Saban are being outcoached, and we've never seen Nick Saban make those types of mistakes, right? Listen, the players didn't necessarily perform that well. And at the end of the day, it's the players who decide these games more so than the coaches. But when you have that type of coaching blunder where you make that dumb of a mistake, you have an opportunity to score points and you give that up. I think that was the nail in the coffin for this Alabama team. And just an unreal game, man. Like, I give credit to Clemson, right? And I'm not surprised that Clemson won. But the way that they won is just completely shocking.
Yeah, it's like you're watching the game, and obviously there was 4 fantastic games we watched in the NFL. And then you go, oh wow, this is probably the best game out of all those. This is Clemson, Alabama. This is what the Final Four was meant for, to get the 2 best teams playing each other. And, Tua throws an interception. It's back and forth, and it's 21-16. Then Tua throws another interception. And you're like, what? What was that? That was 10 yards over the receiver's head. And then Clemson doesn't make any mistakes. And you're just waiting, right, Jared? You're just waiting. You're like, okay, Alabama will eventually come back. This is going to be a really good game. And they just didn't. Now, Alabama did get unlucky in some sorts. Trevor Lawrence, you probably don't expect to make every single great throw, right? But he did. Also, I believe the Alabama corner tore his Achilles on a play that ended up causing a huge touchdown in a time where Alabama needed a stop on defense, and unfortunately, the corner tears his Achilles, and essentially the receiver's wide open and has to beat one defender. So, there was some stuff that happened there. That's why I said Alabama absolutely did have a chance in this game, even though they got blown out. But, you're right. Nick Saban got outclassed. The fake field goal didn't make any sense. Some of the play calling didn't make any sense as far as on 3rd downs and 4th downs, especially that one near the end zone where that was essentially their last chance to score in this game and their last chance to stay in this game, and they didn't do that. And the defense also underperformed too. I know they were on the field a lot, but this is a defense where I was looking at the mock draft for 2019, and there's 7 guys from this team in the mock draft in the first 1 to 3 rounds. So that can't happen. I know Clemson's defense is fantastic, and I thought they would lead them to victory, but Alabama's defense cannot give up 44 points. I don't care what happens. Essentially, they only gave up 37 because of the pick 6, but still, that's too much. You look at the scores, though, throughout the whole year, that didn't happen this year. They weren't giving up 37 points. So, yeah, Trevor Lawrence is a great prospect. I think we should pump the brakes a little bit, to use one of your terms, Jared, because we thought this about Tua, and Tua just lost the national championship by 28 points. So I'm just saying, Trevor Lawrence is fantastic, and I think he didn't have the toughest schedule this year, and he played up to par in the one game. But let's say Clemson has 4 or 5 major opponents next year. That's where I'm going to see if Trevor Lawrence takes that next step. Because Tua did take that next step, but against some other team, he did make mistakes in some of the bigger games, especially the national championship. You can blame him completely for 2 touchdowns for Clemson in this game, and those are big. You cannot have turnovers turn into touchdowns, let alone points in national championship games. So we should pump the brakes a little bit. Sorry, I have something playing on my computer for a second, but pump the brakes a little bit. And here's the big thing about this Clemson win, though. You have the great quarterback, right? You have their number 1 receiver, Justin Ross, who is also a true freshman, right? So you have that for the next 2 years. There's also a top quarterback prospect here in Orange County, the number 1 prospect in all of college football, much like Trevor Lawrence, that has been deciding between Oregon, who has had a lot of recruits in their top 5 recruiting, Alabama, and Clemson. He was at this game on the Clemson sideline. They're going to get... You're talking about Trevor Lawrence being the number 1 pick. They're going to get a kid I've watched in high school is the best quarterback prospect I've ever seen in my life. So you're looking at Trevor Lawrence being fantastic. You're beating teams like Alabama. That's going to get you this kid who's number 1. His name is DJ. His last name is extremely hard to say. It has U's and I's and a lot of other names that you can look him up. Just look up DJ St. John Bosco. St. John Bosco was the number 1 team all this year in high school. But he is a senior this season. He's 6'5", 250 pounds, can run, and can throw the ball. He is the number 1. He's the best. People say he's the best high school prospect possibly ever. Trevor Lawrence was that as well. So Clemson potentially is going to keep going, and that's what wins like this are going to get. And now Nick Saban is potentially going to lose out on another number one quarterback because he got blown out in this game. So you're talking about Nick Saban, he got outclassed. He's going to get outclassed in recruiting now because of this too. So this was a huge win for Clemson, and to be honest, Clemson might be the new dynasty in college football now.
There's no to be honest. Clemson is the new dynasty. Clemson proved, and Dabo Swinney said this in many of the post-game interviews. He said that, and he wasn't trying to say this to rub salt in the wounds of Alabama. He was just saying this from a collective standpoint, talking about his own team and what their message was going into this game, was that we not only wanted to beat Alabama, we wanted to make a statement, right? We're little, he kept saying, like, we're little old Clemson, right? Yeah. Quote unquote. We should not be here. I should not be here, right? And Nick Saban has been a coach his entire life. Alabama, their history going back to Bear Bryant, I mean, Alabama is all about football. We're little old Clemson. I'm not even supposed to be here as a head coach. And we have done something completely dynamic that no other school has done, right? So I think what he was trying to say is that we wanted to come out and make a statement that the top dog for the last decade can be dethroned, and we are the team that's going to do it. So they not only wanted to win, they wanted to win by double digits. They wanted a blowout. They wanted a statement that, yes, not only for recruiting purposes, but for this team and for those seniors, and for some of those seniors like Higgins and some of those, or not Higgins, but some of the other players, Wilkins, that ended up staying, who could have left and gone to the NFL draft last year. He wanted to say, this is for you guys, right? Thank you for staying, and we're sending you out, better than you could have ever imagined. True. So a couple more points I quickly wanted to bring up. Ross, the true freshman receiver for Clemson, you talk about recruiting, right? He's from Alabama. He was supposed to and was being
I'm so glad you said that, by the way.
Heavily recruited by Alabama. Everyone, including his family down to his mom and dad, thought that he was going to Alabama. When he went to Clemson, one of the main points that sold him on Clemson was supposedly the family atmosphere and just what that team and what that school kind of how they made him feel. Now, I don't think that was a knock on Alabama as to say that he didn't feel comfortable there, but I think he was kind of saying, without actually saying it, that Alabama's just a little more professional. They're a little more run like an NFL team.
Exactly, yeah.
To whereas Clemson is, I feel, a little more at home, even though you're away from home, right? Okay. There were supposedly rumors going around, and I'm sure it's true. Now, I'm sure his actual mom and dad and his immediate family were behind him and are behind him, but some of his relatives were still rooting for Alabama, rooting against him, right? Like, hilarious. I mean, that's just how it is in the South, right? It doesn't matter. You have a team and you root for them no matter what. So, big props to Ross for coming out and playing huge when he could have easily been doing the same thing for Alabama. And one quick thing that I want to mention about that St. John Bosco quarterback, he has a huge decision to make, obviously, and he can obviously go to Oregon and, kind of stay on the West Coast and probably start his freshman year. If he goes to Clemson, if Trevor Lawrence plays anything like he did in this championship game, he's going to be the starter for the next 2 years, period. Yeah. So this quarterback for St. John Bosco, if he is okay with sitting for a year, potentially two, then I think he needs to go to Clemson. Yeah. If he goes to Alabama, he would only have to sit for 1 year because after next year, Tua is going pro.
Here's the problem, though. Tua's brother is behind him, and Tua's brother is not just as good of a prospect, but he's a 4 or 5 star prospect too. And so it's interesting. But think about this case. Trevor Lawrence plays next 2019, 2020 goes to the NFL. This DJ kid is a 2020 recruit. So he would be Clemson. Let's say he redshirts Trevor Lawrence's junior year. So they go from Trevor Lawrence 3 years to the number one prospect again for another 3 years. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. They had Deshaun Watson before this year,
right?
So, and obviously they had the Kelly Bryant year, and Kelly Bryant obviously wasn't who we thought he was. But this team is the new dynasty. You have potentially now. This kid hasn't gone there yet, but this is the new dynasty in college football, and I'm excited. And I'm happy for those seniors also that Clemson they got that big win.
I think what we're trying to say is life is pretty damn good.
Yeah.
If you're a Clemson fan or a part of that Clemson.
If your name's
program
Dabo,
right
you're having fun time until Friday night, like he said.
He did just kick in a $250,000 incentive for winning a national championship game. So a little icing on the cake.
Absolutely.
For the Dabo Swinney and his family there.
Absolutely. We need to go to break. Good win for Clemson. Also, we were talking about the recruits going to the school. How about the promo those two defensive linemen hit? They said it. They said, our coach will let us dance in the locker room. This is not Alabama. Come to Clemson. We have fun here and still beat Alabama by 28.
Oh yeah,
they have the case. You know, they're pumping themselves up, and they have a case. Now, I was excited to see that whole thing, but game was a little disappointing in a way, but it also wasn't disappointing because we got to see a historic win, a historic blowout of Alabama. All right, going to break. Coming up next, we have news that just happened about some head coaches. So we're going to be talking all about the new NFL head coaches. We have 5 new head coaches. If you're listening live and you don't know the story, 2 more head coaches have been named in the AFC, along with the 3 that have already been named in the NFC. So we're going to be talking about that coming up next on the Cover 2 podcast.
I don't have a problem with what Kingsbury is doing. And the reason why is because he's getting a major promotion. And so if I take a job at McDonald's working the French fry stand, and then 2 weeks later they offer me a job to manage the McDonald's, it's a no-brainer to me.
Got to move on up.
And so if this was some kind of lateral move, he was going to the NFL to be an offensive coordinator, or to another college to be an offensive coordinator, I get it. But there's only 32 of these jobs, and he got one.
After 1 year retiring, is officially back in the NFL with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He's going to sign a 4-year deal with a 5th-year option. He's getting the band back together as well. I am told that he is going to hire Todd Bowles as his defensive coordinator. The former Jets coach was highly coveted and now lands in Tampa on a very beefed-up coaching staff, and one that's very good for quarterback Jameis Winston.
We are back here on the Cover 2 podcast. We continue a football-packed Cover 2 podcast today. We have already talked about the playoff games in the NFL from last weekend. We analyzed all 4 games, and we also just analyzed the national championship game between Clemson and Alabama. Clemson's dominance will likely continue after that game. So if you missed that, go back when we put this podcast on YouTube and check that out if you missed that segment. But right now, we're going to move on. We're sticking with the NFL. Too much to talk about. There are 5 brand new head coaches, and if there is a 6th announced while we're doing the podcast, we will talk about that, because Jared has a new Apple Watch now, and he can get these updates on his watch while we're getting this. And he actually already got the first 2 updates of these new head coaches this morning while we were recording, so we're going to talk about those first. There have been 5, like I said, 5 new head coaches in the NFL. We're starting right here. Freddie Kitchens has been promoted to the Browns head coach. Jared, what are your thoughts on this real quick? We kind of need to go through these coaches, quicker, because we do have a lot to talk about with the last 2 coaches. So what are your thoughts? Freddie Kitchens gets the bump up to head coach.
Right. Listen, I mean, I don't really know too much about this guy, and I don't think many people know too much about this guy. He was the running backs coach and assistant head coach to begin the year, and this seems like all the way back when Hugh Jackson and Todd Haley were still the head coach and offensive coordinator for this team. When they both got fired and Greg Williams became the interim head coach, this is when Freddie Kitchens became the assistant head coach and then the offensive coordinator. So the Browns thought so highly of him that they denied him permission to speak with other teams about head coaching positions because
they Lynn Swanned him.
Right, because they felt that good about him. So, and I think the main reason why they did keep him was because he has not only a very strong relationship with Baker Mayfield, but Baker Mayfield, his stats once Kitchens took over as the offensive coordinator kind of blew up. So they want to continue that relationship and see if that can grow. So I think the biggest thing for Kitchens will be to bring in somewhat of an experienced staff around you. This is your first time being a head coach. Up until probably a couple weeks ago, there were not many people that even thought you would be a head coach right now. So hopefully he has some strong relationships with other coaches in the league who can come in and help ease this transition. Because, listen, This is the 18th head coach in the Cleveland Browns history. They're not necessarily bringing in a guy who's well known and has been a coach already, right? So it's the chips are stacked against him right now, and he needs to bring some experienced staff to help him groom the rest of this team.
Yeah, Freddie Kitchens, I know of him. He was with the Cardinals until last year when he switched to the Browns. From 2007 to 2017, he was with the Cardinals. He was a position coach, tight ends, quarterbacks, running backs. Was in the Super Bowl with the Cardinals against the Steelers, and also was in with Arians. Obviously, as the quarterbacks and running backs coach, as the quarterbacks coach when the Cardinals were on their run of successful seasons with Carson Palmer. So he has some clout there. Last year, he was actually promoted to associate head coach when Hugh Jackson was fired too. So they did think highly of him already, which makes sense why when you fire Craig Williams, if you think highly of Freddie Kitchens, you essentially fire him as head coach. It makes sense. You're right. Baker Mayfield obviously worked better under him than Todd Haley. Offense is the new thing in the NFL here. So, it makes sense as a hire. He's a Cardinals guy. He did well with us. Nothing to complain about there. So, I wish him well. There was rumors that he might join Bruce Arians' staff in Tampa Bay, which we'll talk about. He obviously didn't do that. He got a much better position as head coach of a much improved and different Browns team than they have been the last 18 years or whatever. So good for Freddie Kitchens, and we'll see we'll see how he does, and we'll see if the Browns can improve and make the playoffs next year. All right, moving on. The Denver Broncos have named their new coach after firing Vance Joseph. They've named Bears defensive coordinator Vic Fangio as their new head coach. A shift from the other head coaches that have been hired. He's a defensive coordinator, where the rest of the four that have been hired are offensive coordinators, offensive gurus. Jared, what's your take on this? Why are the Broncos going the defensive route instead of going the offensive route with Vic Fangio?
Yeah, this one's a little surprising to me because the Broncos, in their previous head coach, when they hired Vance Joseph from Miami, who was their defensive coordinator, so this is their second time going back-to-back defensive guys. And it's not that it's a bad thing, it's just this Broncos offense, since their Super Bowl with Peyton Manning and once he retired, they've gone through 4 quarterbacks, and their offense does not look the same. Now, it looks promising as you've got Philip Lindsay, as being their lead back, and you still have Sanders, you know what I mean? So, like, you have some pieces.
Courtland Sutton,
right. But this offense has not clicked since that Super Bowl win. So, I'm a little surprised that they didn't necessarily go offensive heavy in their head coaching, but there's a rumor going around that Gary Kubiak could come back on as their offensive coordinator, and that would really help with their running game and their play action. So that's the thing. Fangio, I like him because he's very well respected in the league. He's been a coach in the league for over 30 years. This is his first time being a head coach, however. He comes in from the Bears. He took the Bears from the 30th ranked defense in 2017 to now the number 1 defense this year. So I think that says something, right? The thing I will say, though, is he's 60 years old, right? So he's a little older. You kind of see a trend of teams going young. Obviously, you see the Rams with McVay, and you see now Cliff Kingsbury in Arizona, right? And even Nagy and with the Bears. So they're kind of going
Freddie
away
Kitchens
from
is only 44.
Right, you're going away from the trend in that standpoint. But John Elway came out and said, I want an experienced guy. Nothing against Vance Joseph, but we want a guy who's been around the block multiple times, who knows how to lead men, and basically is great at what he does. So we'll see if this one works out.
No, yeah, I mean, you look at this guy's resume, and he's been with some of the best defenses in the NFL, and he's been a defensive coordinator since 1995. So you're right. This guy's been around the block, and it has been trying to prove himself for now almost 25 years. Almost 25 years in the NFL. So you look at some of the teams. He was special assistant to the head coach in Baltimore, 06-08. Those defenses were unbelievable. Linebackers coach in 09. Obviously, we know the linebackers, Terrell Suggs, Ray Lewis, other types. He coached them. He was the Stanford defensive coordinator in 2010. Those years where Stanford was fantastic. on their defense. He was the 49ers defensive coordinator from 2011 to 2014. They had a great defense. The Bears, obviously, and now the Broncos. So he has proven himself defensively, but just like I'm about to say with Cliff Kingsbury, he does need to hire an offensive guru because you don't want to end up like Steve Wilks with the Cardinals, right? Because Steve Wilks is the same thing. He was defensive coordinator for the Carolina Panthers, goes over to the Cardinals, and the offense is atrocious. Hires Mike McCoy, the wrong hire, and the Cardinals. Now, the Cardinals probably wouldn't have made the playoffs anyways this year, but the Cardinals now have the number 1 pick, thanks in part to Steve Wilks not hiring the right people. So Vic Fangio needs to hire the right people on offense, or I don't think he'll be as successful as he has been in the past. Anything else on Fangio, or should we move on?
Let's move on.
Let's move on. We're going to stick to, sort of the NFC North here. The Green Bay Packers have hired their new head coach. It's Matt LaFleur, who is the offensive coordinator for the Titans. I believe he was offensive coordinator with the Rams before this with Sean McVay in McVay's first year. 4 years, 5th-year option. This is an interesting one. I'll give my opinion on this one first. LaFleur, there's some context here. People have been saying, well, why would you hire LaFleur? LaFleur, the offense for the Titans actually got worse this year. I think that's partly due to Mariota having shoulder issues, and I'm not going to put the blame there on LaFleur. This hire does question a little bit. It's not a big name. I think it has to completely do with an understanding that Aaron Rodgers is going to be part of this offensive play calling in a way. I know that kind of sounds ridiculous, but I think you're looking at coaches. Maybe you looked at Josh McDaniels and you said, "Oh, that guy might try to go over Aaron's head," and obviously that didn't work with Mike McCarthy. LaFleur might kind of let Aaron choose some things, make some different calls and stuff like that, and let Aaron, the quarterback, the best quarterback in the league, make some decisions. So I see that the reason he's being hired. 4 years, 5th-year option. That seems like a lot for a guy that's never coached, been a head coach in the NFL, but nonetheless, he's the he's the head coach, and he does have some clout. But this was a little questionable. I'm very interested to see how this works out.
This was the most skeptical coaching hire of the 5 head coaches that we've seen so far. Now, his resume speaks for itself, right? Like Nick mentioned, 2 years ago, he was the Rams offensive coordinator in Sean McVay's first year as head coach. The year before that, he was with the Atlanta Falcons when Matt Ryan won the MVP. And then before that, he was the Washington Redskins quarterback coach when Robert Griffin was the offensive rookie of the year, right? So he knows how to... He's worked with really good quarterbacks, and he's known for using play action to get his quarterbacks out on the move. And we all know how well and how great of a quarterback Aaron Rodgers is when he's on the move. He's arguably one of the best quarterbacks and has one of the strongest arms along with his accuracy. So from that standpoint, this can pair well. I'm just a little surprised that the Packers went with such a young and inexperienced guy coming off of the heels of Mike McCarthy, who won them a Super Bowl and was definitely experienced. So I think the thing I will say, and you touched on this, Nick, is Aaron Rodgers definitely had a say in this, right? You're not paying Aaron Rodgers the money that you're paying him, and you know the type of leader that he is. I mean, without Aaron Rodgers, this Packers team is no good. He is, I mean, you can compare him to, he's a Tom Brady, he's a Peyton Manning. I mean, think of it like with Andrew Luck and the Colts. Without Andrew Luck, the Colts are almost nothing. With him, they're in the playoffs, right? Yeah. If Aaron Rodgers stays healthy all year, they probably have a better chance of being in the playoffs. So Aaron Rodgers, I think, definitely co-signed this hire. And one, in part, because I think he saw what LaFleur can do offensively. And two, not to say this in a negative way, but I think he can control the narrative a little more. I think he's going to have more say in the offensive play calling. And I think he will be able to say, all right, this is what I want to do this week. This is what I want to, you know what I mean? So I think he will be quarterback / assistant coach for the next upcoming year for the Packers.
Yeah, it's interesting, too, because you have, you talked about the quarterbacks he's coached in the past. Obviously, last year, a little sketchy with the Tennessee Titans with Marcus Mariota, but he made Blaine Gabbert look like a pretty good quarterback in that game against the Colts that tried to get them in the playoffs. He also was the offensive coordinator of the Rams. Obviously, that offense, that offense was amazing. He was the head coach of Atlanta when they got to the Super Bowl with Matt Ryan. And interestingly enough, he was the quarterback. He was the quarterbacks coach with Atlanta. Quarterbacks coach with Notre Dame in 2014. And do you know who their quarterback was that year? Deshaun Kaiser, who's the backup in Green Bay. So that might have come into the hiring as well. Let's say Aaron Rodgers doesn't end up with the Green Bay Packers. You do have a guy that literally coached your backup quarterback. So that, I think, will help in creating possibly that good backup as well. An unsung thing in the NFL. Not as important, but that's an interesting fact nonetheless. But yeah, interesting hire. He is 39. So another young quarterback, another young coach, and we'll see how he does. All right, moving on to another interesting hire. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers have hired a coach. This is also a 4-year deal with a 5th-year option. This guy's just a bit older than Matt LaFleur. Bruce Arians has been hired as the head coach in Tampa Bay.
You mean the guy that said he was retiring?
Yeah, right. From a team that I think we know about. I might be wearing their jacket a little bit.
I think so.
Yeah, he retired from the Cardinals last year and said that he was done with football. He now has been hired as the new head coach of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers after going into broadcasting for a year for CBS. He has familiarity with Jameis Winston, and he is obviously another offensive guru, a quarterback guy. He's developed quarterbacks of the likes of Ben Roethlisberger, Carson Palmer, and Andrew Luck. So, he has the clout there, and Jameis Winston, he hopes to do the next thing. So far, he's been trying to rebuild he's been trying to rebuild the old Arizona Cardinals staff. He's already tried to hire Harold Goodwin, who was his offensive coordinator, Byron Leftwich, who was kind of his lackey, and he's tried to hire Todd Bowles. I was just looking that up. That's not a for sure yet. We were talking about that during the break. But he's trying to hire literally like the 2013, 2014 Cardinal staff. It's not even a joke. So besides Freddie Kitchens, everybody's coming back. So it's going to be interesting. Obviously, the Cardinals were extremely successful under Arians and a lot of these guys. So you never know. I'm not that high on it, though, because Bruce Arians is older. He had some heart issues with the Cardinals his last year, similar to like an Urban Meyer with Ohio State. So obviously, if he can get the Tampa Bay Buccaneers into the playoffs, stuff like that, and become successful, that's great. But I just don't see it. And you might have thought that being a Cardinals fan, Bruce Arians being successful with us, I would be a lot higher. I'm not. I don't think this is actually going to work out as well. I think this is more old school football, and it's not the new school NFL that's going to work. I think the Tampa Bay Buccaneers will be in the playoffs, possibly next year and within the next couple years, but I don't see them being a Super Bowl contender with Bruce Arians. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, this one's a little skeptical as well, and I think this is the situation, and this happens with coaches. You kind of hear it all the time. Coaches tend to, whether they get fired or they say they're, quote, retiring, they take a year or two off, right? And what happens? They get that itch again. I don't care how old you are, if you're 45 years old or if you're, in this case, in your mid-60s like Bruce Arians is, you get that itch, and that never goes away, right? And so when head coaching vacancies pop up, you maybe throw a feeler out there, or maybe the team throws a feeler out there to you and says, hey, just, seeing if you're interested at all. And maybe you're not at first, but then maybe you go back and talk to your wife and you kind of say, hey, honey, Tampa Bay's not so bad. It's in Florida. It's sunny most of the time. It rains a little bit, but it's better than being in Indianapolis or somewhere where it's cold, right?
Exactly.
And then the wheels start to spin and you kind of, hey, you know what? I've still got all my playbooks and I haven't thrown anything away. Maybe I can do this. I'm feeling a little better. My health is feeling good. I've taken a year off. I've listened to the doctors. I feel great. Let's do it, right? And I think that's exactly what happened here. Bruce 100%. Arians took a year off. Like you mentioned, he had health issues and that type of thing, and that's one of the reasons why he left Arizona. But I think he's feeling better now. And I think the second biggest thing to this is that he does have a great relationship with Jameis Winston. Jameis Winston is from Alabama, and growing up, Winston was going to Bruce Arians' quarterback camps in Birmingham, Alabama. So they already have a very good relationship, and that's something that was kind of a downfall for Dirk Cutter, with the Bucs, that there was some friction there that, and rumors going around that Cutter was a little skeptical of Jameis Winston and his injuries, and that's one of the reasons why Fitzpatrick took over as the starting quarterback during the regular season for the Buccaneers last year. So I think this management team for the Buccaneers said, we need to find someone that can relate and that can make Winston comfortable. Because the Buccaneers already picked up Winston's fourth-year option, which means he's getting $20 million this year. You're not paying him $20 million to sit on the bench, right?
No.
So you're going to bring in a guy that he is comfortable with and that they can, continue to build their stronger relationship. So I think that's the second main reason why Bruce Arians is back in the NFL with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Yeah, no, it's going to be interesting. They have a lot of offensive weapons. If he can get Jameis Winston to that next level, the level he was drafted at, I think the Tampa Bay team, like I said, I think they can be a playoff team every single year because you can rebuild the defense and by hiring the right defensive coordinator, and Todd Bowles would be absolutely the right defensive coordinator to hire. You have Mike Evans. They don't have a running game, but Arians was able to he's always been a more passing, a more passing coach anyways, and he was able to kind of get Tris Johnson and David Johnson. Probably he was able to make them look better than they actually were. So I think you're fine on that case. You also have O.J. Howard, a nice young tight end. Interesting also, just to look at next year, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers do play the Arizona Cardinals next year, so that will be interesting in my
Arizona?
case. No, at home. At home,
okay,
so yeah,
okay.
that would have been special, and it would have been a cool thing there. But if Bruce, he's hired until he's 70 years old. That's when his contract's supposed to go up. But it will be interesting. It's interesting to see. I think they can be good. I just don't know if Bruce Arians is a Super Bowl head coach. I think he makes some sketchy decisions sometimes in games. And being a Cardinals fan, and being in that Bruce Arians era in Arizona, there were some questionable calls and stuff like that. And I think are a little old school and not in the current NFL. But I could be wrong. I don't know if this was the best hire. Maybe short term it is, but long term, obviously, this isn't going to work out because Arians will be 70, 71 years old by the time his contract is up. All right. We need to switch topics. Well, no, we don't need to switch topics. We need to get into the Cliff Kingsbury situation. This goes over two sports in a way, college football and the NFL. We have 5 minutes left in the segment, so I'm going to take over a little bit because I want this affects both the two teams I follow, and that's the USC Trojans and the Arizona Cardinals. Speaking on the Arizona Cardinals real quick, I like the hire because I think the Cardinals just need the exact opposite of what they had last year. A defensive coach. The offense sucked and was boring to watch. Okay? No doubt about it. They were the worst team in all of the NFL last year. The number one pick, and they deserved that. They were hard to watch. I didn't watch some of their games last year because it was just too difficult, and I want something to change. Cliff Kingsbury will change that. And all he really needs to do, in my opinion, is hire a good defensive coordinator, a la Sean McVay with Wade Phillips. And people that want to, say, well, at Texas Tech he wasn't a good head coach. Okay, well, Sean McVay wasn't a head coach before he was the Rams. He was never a head coach anywhere. And I have the stats here. Sean McVay was 4-12, 9-7, and 8-7-1 as offensive coordinator in Washington. Okay, so that's not amazing. That's about what Cliff Kingsbury was at Texas Tech. So let's pump the brakes on the he's not ready to coach. He's fine. In the new NFL, we've seen now 3 head coaches hired this year that are 44 years old or younger. Okay? Cliff Kingsbury being one of them. That's just the way the NFL works. If they hire a good defensive coordinator, I think the Cardinals will be fine and could build a great team and a great roster around Josh Rosen, Christian Kirk, and others. So now getting on to the USC thing, because this is, I think, actually a bigger deal. USC is absolutely in shambles right now. If you don't know what happened this past week, Cliff Kingsbury was the offensive coordinator at USC for about 45 days. I actually think less than that.
It was less.
It was less than that. And so when it came to head coaches starting to be looked at and hired, there was rumors that teams wanted to look at Cliff Kingsbury, the Arizona Cardinals and New York Jets, to be specific. So normally you were like, okay, they'll interview him. Let's see what happens. Nope. Lynn Swann, the figurehead in charge there at USC, I don't know if he actually does much, but he is the figurehead at USC. He blocked Cliff Kingsbury from getting head coaching considerations. There's a new NFL rule that was just passed, I believe, last year that said you have to ask athletic directors for permission to hire college coaches, all that stuff. Lynn Swann said no. He was the only AD to say no. This obviously pissed off Kingsbury. He now quit on USC. He'll pay them a $150,000 buyout, which the Cardinals said they're already going to take care of. So Kingsbury, that won't even come out of his own pocket. And USC loses their offensive coordinator. They did get a lot of recruits this past weekend offensively. They have one of the best wide receiving cores coming up the next 2 or 3 years because of these recruits. But they lose their OC, and I could see some of these kids decommitting. Jared, I know you're the USC guy here. I'm more of a UCLA guy. What is happening with USC, and does there finally need to be possibly a Clay Helton firing after Clay Helton firing and Lynn Swann firing after this debacle?
You know, this one to me is I don't know all the facts about it, so I'm not going to sit here and try to figure it out right now. Here's what I will say, and this is just me speculating on two possibilities that happened. USC, they're not dumb. Okay, they're really not. So this first thing that I'm about to say, I guess it could happen, but I don't know how it would. USC obviously, makes a lot of coaching changes this offseason after going through a horrific year, right? Cliff Kingsbury is available, and he's probably the hottest offensive coordinator prospect on the market, right? If you're USC, you do whatever you can to get him. You do get him. That kind of revitalizes the offense a little bit and gives Clay Helton, a little bit more breathing room, right? It's like, okay, I brought in an experienced offensive coordinator who's worked with Patrick Mahomes, he's worked with Case Keenum, Johnny Manziel, Baker Mayfield, all big name guys who have made a name for himself in the NFL for the most part, except for Johnny Manziel, probably. They bring him on. For USC, you have to understand, even before you bring Kingsbury in for a meeting, that this is not his permanent home, right? He was a head coach before, so what makes you think that he would want to stay here as an offensive coordinator for multiple years, right? If I'm Kingsbury, the only reason I would go to USC, well, there's two reasons. I go to USC, number one, because it's such a highly touted program. And there's an opportunity that I could step into the head coaching title if and when, Clay Helton gets fired. Or I make a good enough name for myself, I spend a year or two at USC, and then I get a head coaching job somewhere else, okay? So in the back of his head, he has to be thinking that. But if you're USC, how do you not get some type of assurance from him that says, hey, listen, if you sign this contract, you are with us for at least 1 year, right? Like, I don't want to hear about you being intrigued about other head coaching opportunities. And those were the rumors, too. For this year, right? You are signing a contract with us for at least 1 year, okay? So, you're right. I'm sure when Lynn Swann blocked head coaching opportunities from Kingsbury, he got pretty upset. And that's when he went to them and said, I want to release, I want out. But how do you not come to some type of agreement from the get-go that says, if you come on board with us, you are with us 1,000% for at least 1 year? Because if USC had any idea that, Kingsbury was looking to leave immediately, why would you even sign him in the first place? It doesn't make any sense to me. You either get assurance from him that he's staying for at least a year, or you don't sign him at all, because now all you've done is given false hope to players, right? You said, oh, we're bringing in Cliff Kingsbury. This is going to get us great recruits. And in the back of your heads, you know that he's going to go and, apply for head coaching opportunities this year, literally a month after he signed a contract with you. It doesn't make any sense to me. So whether Cliff Kingsbury lied to USC and said he would stay for a year, or whether USC was just that naive, I really don't know the true answer to it. But it is just very, very interesting and odd about how all of this has played out.
Yeah, no, it's just terrible for USC. I mean, we could rip them to shreds right now, but we're running out of time on the segment. Literally, Jared, the All-American, the Army All-American game, the high school game where a lot of the top recruits make their decisions where they want to go, including 5-star wide receivers like Kyle Ford and Brew McCoy, who picked USC. later that night, these rumors started happening. Not even like the next day, that night. Like during the NFL games. Oh, Cliff Kingsbury is getting NFL and Lynn Swann. Like, these kids, they make the decision of a lifetime where they're going to go to college, where they're going to possibly get their NFL experience, their exposure toward the NFL. And the guy that they're going to USC to play with, leaves the next day because USC screws up Lynn Swann, Clay Helton. They screw it up, not Cliff Kingsbury. I don't put blame on him. They screwed him. Yeah, they screwed him. And now and now the Cardinals aren't even going to make him pay for it, which I love. I love that they're just like, we got it. It's $150,000. We could care less.
Oh, that's chump change.
Yeah, it's nothing. So, good for the Cardinals making the decision on this guy quick and not letting this situation get worse. And USC does the exact opposite thing. I mean, you'd think USC would make a better decision than the Arizona Cardinals organization after the Steve Wilkes hire, right? It was the exact opposite. USC makes terrible decisions. To be honest, they need to fire Clay Helton. They need to fire absolutely Lynn Swann. The problem is, and I've said this on this podcast before, they're dealing with lawsuits and millions, hundreds of millions of dollars over this USC gynecologist issue. And that's their focus, and they're not focusing on sports. And that's why the basketball team sucks. That's why the baseball team has underperformed. That's why most of their sports teams have underperformed. That's why USC was 7-5 in football last year. Because they don't have the right guys in charge. Cliff Kingsbury leaves. Now, and by the way, the quarterback's coach was hired by Cliff Kingsbury. So he's probably not going to stay at USC either. So the quarterback debacle with JT Daniels and Jack Sears and all that stuff is going to continue because USC doesn't have the right guys in place. They should have hired Cliff Kingsbury as head coach and should have fired Clay Helton. Nonetheless, they didn't, and now we have 5 new NFL coaches, including USC's offensive coordinator. All right, we need to go to break. We're going long on this podcast. We're going to 11:15 today because we have too much to talk about. Coming up next, a little break from football, sort of. We have Do You Care coming up next. We'll try to get as many different sports in as possible. We do have to talk about Antonio Brown and other things as well in that segment. So Do You Care coming up next on the other side of this quick break.
We get the chance today to add one of the premier pitchers in the world, a pitcher who has had a great deal of success in the NPB on the international stage, and now we are excited to bring him here to T-Mobile Park in Seattle, where we think the fit is just about as good as it could be.
All right, here's a breaking story. According to Jason La Canfora, he's an NFL reporter, Antonio Brown has requested a trade from the Steelers. Very unlikely Rooney would capitulate. Antonio Brown here, according to the reporter, has issues with Mike Tomlin and Ben Roethlisberger and feels like the coach is too aligned with the quarterback.
Breaking news from the NBA. ESPN's Adrian Wojnarowski reporting that Tom Thibodeau has been fired as president and head coach of the Minnesota Timberwolves. Thibodeau, midway through his 3rd season in Minneapolis. Timberwolves right now 19-21 on the season, despite 2 straight wins, including a win over the Lakers today. That would put them, though, 11th in the Western Conference, 2 games under 500. They lost in the first round of the playoffs last year.
Welcome back to the Cover 2 podcast. As it is time for our favorite segment of the show.
Absolutely.
Yes, sir. Nick, I'll let you do the honors again.
Yeah, it is time for the first edition of 2019 of Do You Care?
Nick's been waiting a couple weeks to say that one.
Yes, I know. I've been so excited. So we still have some football on this edition of Do You Care, just because there's just too much to talk about, Jared. Football is important, and it's playoff time, and there's stuff to talk about. We got some basketball, and we got some baseball as well. So might as well start off. And Jared, like we per usually do, you get the first question. Jared, do you care that Tom Thibodeau has been fired as president and head coach of the Minnesota Timberwolves?
No, I don't care. The writing was on the wall, and really this should have happened weeks ago when Jimmy Butler was traded from Minnesota to Philadelphia. I think that was the kind of nail in the coffin for Tom Thibodeau. He was the last head coach / general manager, and I think you probably won't see that combination for a long, long time. Just a couple years ago, back in 2016, there were 5 head coach / general managers. I think it's just a little too much for one person to chew, right?
Yeah,
you not only are in charge of your players, but you're in charge of the personnel and making all of those executive decisions. And at the end of the day, I think it was just way too much for Thibodeau. So the Timberwolves have been irrelevant this year, even though they have a lot of talent on their team. And because of that, the blame has to go somewhere. And unfortunately, that was the man who had too much power. Nick, do you care that DeMarcus Cousins is set to make his Warriors debut on January 18th?
No, I don't care because I'm a Warriors fan, but I am interested to see how this works out for the Warriors. I don't want him to succeed because I don't want the Warriors to do well and possibly beat the Clippers or Lakers in the playoffs. That probably will happen anyways, whether DeMarcus Cousins is on the team. But nonetheless, Cousins made even more of a snake in the grass move than Kevin Durant this past offseason, signing with the Warriors for 1 year. Shows his kind of character. I don't like the guy. Haven't really liked the guy ever, but he's coming back. It's going to be very interesting to see how he fits into that offense. I don't care because I'm not a Warriors fan, like I said, but you got to be interested as a basketball fan and a sports fan in general to see a lineup with 5 All-Stars on the court, and that has never happened in the NBA before. So we'll see what happens with him, but I hope he does not succeed in Golden State, and I think most NBA fans would agree with me on that one. Jared, do you care that Antonio Brown wants a trade from the Pittsburgh Steelers?
I do care, and this has turned into just a debacle in Pittsburgh, right? You have arguably the best wide receiver in the game who has a major issue with not only Ben Roethlisberger, but potentially other players and coaches within that organization, right? Week 17, the last game of the season, Pittsburgh has a slim chance to get into the playoffs. They need to win and get a lot of help, right? It came out that Sunday that Antonio Brown got into a major argument with Ben Roethlisberger and some other players during the week of practice. Antonio Brown doesn't even suit up for the game. He's on the sidelines in like a mink coat, watching as his team is fighting for their playoff lives, and he ends up leaving at halftime. Doesn't even stay to watch the end of the game,
ridiculous.
Right? That shows how much beef is basically going on between him and this organization right now. I'm not sitting here and siding with Antonio Brown on that at all. I think when your team has an opportunity to make the playoffs, you squash whatever beef you have and you try to get in, right? Now, obviously, they didn't because of other circumstances, but this is basically leading to rumors that Antonio Brown will not be in a Pittsburgh Steelers uniform next year. And I don't think I would have ever said that in my wildest dreams because, like I said, when talents like this come around, you don't let them go, regardless of, if they're throwing a temper tantrum or what. But I think the fact that Antonio Brown basically said he's not suiting up for this team at a time when they needed him, I think the writing's on the wall, and the Steelers, I think they can definitely get a first-round pick for him, but they have to trade him and basically move on with Juju Smith-Schuster as their number one receiver. Nick, do you care that the Mariners are signing a star Japanese pitcher who some say compares to Shohei Ohtani?
No, I don't care. The Mariners have had a very weird offseason. They've let Nelson Cruz go. They've traded away Robinson Cano in their closer. They've traded their star shortstop, Gene Segura. They've also added Edwin Encarnacion. They've kept Kyle Seager. And they've also traded James Paxton to the Yankees. And now they signed this Japanese pitcher, Yusei Kikuchi. I hope I'm saying that name right.
Kikuchi.
4 years, $56 million, but that is after the signing fee that was in the millions of dollars as well. So they're paying a lot for this guy. He's not a hitter or anything like that, like Shohei Ohtani is, but he's another Japanese star pitcher that will come over and probably help the Mariners right away. So good for them for signing him, but this has just been such a weird offseason. I don't know what to think about this signing because I don't know how this guy will do. These Japanese pitchers are also used to pitching once a week in Japan instead of twice a week a lot that MLB pitchers do. They do 7 starting pitchers in Japan, and the MLB does obviously 5 in a rotation. So there's always that big difference. But yeah, so interesting, and we'll see how this guy does. I don't know much about him. Obviously, they signed him a lot of money, so he's probably pretty legit. But the Mariners, I don't know what to think of them. They're just a random, weird team with a weird roster, and this guy adds to that whole thing. Jared, do you care that the Lakers continue to struggle mightily without LeBron James?
Yes, I do care. And listen, we all know how good LeBron James is and what he means to a franchise, so it's not surprising that the Lakers have fallen off a little bit. I think the more surprising thing is that Luke Walton came out publicly and basically threw 2 of his players under the bus. And those players were Brandon Ingram and Lonzo Ball, basically saying that they were not playing hard enough. And that if this Lakers team wants to survive while LeBron is out, he needs those 2 players to step up and give more energy and passion, right? And listen, I don't care what sport it is, you as an athlete are going to have off games and off nights. And there's just going to be times, especially in basketball, where the ball just doesn't go through the hoop, right?
Yeah.
But guess what? You maybe can't control that. What you can control is your effort and how much energy you're giving on the court. And apparently Luke Walton did not like the energy that his team was giving. So after a late-night phone call between Lonzo Ball and Brandon Ingram, they basically discussed what Luke Walton said and how he came out publicly and talked about them. Brandon Ingram came out against the Mavericks 2 nights ago and scored 29 points, while Ball added 21 points, and the Lakers upset the Mavericks in Dallas. Now, I don't think this is necessarily a turning point, but I think the message was sent that, hey, we need to bring our energy level every single night, no matter who we're playing. We might not always win. We might not always shoot the ball well, but what we can control is our energy and effort, and that's something that needs to be done. So LeBron is on his way to returning. I think he should be returning within the next week or 2, which will obviously help this team. But, you know, it's almost inexcusable when you have to question an athlete's effort, especially a professional athlete, right?
Yeah.
These guys are getting paid millions of dollars, and you are on the brightest stage. Like I said, your effort should never, ever be in question. Nick, last question for you. Do you care that UCLA is 2-0 since the firing of Steve Alford?
Yes, I do care. Steve Alford probably should have been fired within the last 2 years. This UCLA team was extremely disappointing this year, losing to every single top opponent they played to, and then losing to teams like Liberty and Belmont. I don't know who those teams are, but they lost to them. And, you know, I was joking around. I told you already that USC basketball sucks, and one of the reasons is because of Lynn Swann. He doesn't care about basketball. UCLA sucked, I think, primarily because of Steve Alford. His coaching style didn't work. He hasn't been able to get through these young UCLA athletes. I know people at UCLA. My sister knows some of these basketball players as well, and they're not getting through to Steve Alford. So he gets fired. They bring in their assistant coach, his interim coach, and they're 2-0 in the Pac-12, and they're in first place in the Pac-12. So maybe they can ride that wave all the way to possibly a conference championship, or at least get enough wins in the Pac-12 where they still can just sneak into the tournament. But Steve Alford needed to go. I think they obviously still need to hire a legitimate head coach. I don't know who that would be yet. I need to do more research of who possibly could be there. I've heard Rick Pitino's name, but I want him to stay away from UCLA. That's a terrible decision. The guy is not a good dude, and literally cheated his way through Louisville. So I don't know why that name keeps coming up. But you know, UCLA, I hope they do better. So a lot of my teams right now are not doing well. You got the Cardinals, Dodgers losing in the World Series. UCLA football sucks. USC football sucks, and the basketball sucks too in college as well. So some of my teams not doing that well right now, and I want them to improve. So we'll see with UCLA. Hopefully they can capture the Pac-12 championship. But this Steve Alford firing needed to happen, and especially needed to happen when UCI was the best team in Southern California basketball. Look at their stats. I'm not even joking. So, yeah, I'm glad that the UCLA finally got rid of him. No more banners flying over Pauley Pavilion and saying "Fire Steve Alford." All right, that's the end of Do You Care? Quick one there because we need to move on. Hey, we're ending the podcast right after this break. We're predicting the divisional playoff round. We're not done. We still got good stuff on this podcast to end it off. So we're going to be reviewing Saints, Eagles, Cowboys, Rams, Chiefs, Colts, and Chargers, Patriots. What matchups, right, Jared? What matchups we got going for you in the playoffs? We'll be right back. Very quick break. Come back in 3 minutes.
3-yard attempt from the right hash mark. And he hits the upright again. That's impossible. And the Eagles run out into the field, but there's still 5 seconds. So they've got to get back. He does it again.
Pressure on. The ball comes out. The ball comes out, and it's recovered by the Chargers. It was taken out of his hands. Uchenna Nwosu. And that will end it.
And he's one-on-one. No help. Prescott going to carry. And reach. Flip. Sets up 1st and goal at the 1. Thompson with the hit, and that is where the ball will be placed a half-yard away from the end. Prescott keeps. No signal. Touchdown. 1st and goal. Ebron, what a year for him. Eric Ebron, touchdown Colts.
We are back here in the Cover 2 podcast. Been a great podcast today. If you're listening live, we are going over the 11 o'clock hour. We're going to 11:15 or 11:20 if we have to. We need to get this done. NFL divisional round playoffs. We are predicting the games. We got 4 games to predict, and we're going to go all in. And might as well start right now with the. We're going to go in chronological order of when the games happen because we don't favor any of these games. Obviously, you favor the Cowboys, but we don't. There's no reason to look at any of these games as bigger than the others. They're all really good. So we're going to start with the Chiefs and Colts. And Jared, I'll let you take away on what you think is going to happen in this game. It's in Kansas City.
Yeah, I mean, this one. Listen, how can you go against the Colts right now? Right? I picked against them last week, and they proved me wrong again. Andrew Luck is on fire right now. This offense. For the Colts right now seems to just be clicking on all cylinders. Not only is Luck being able to throw the ball well to T.Y. Hilton and to Eric Ebron, but this running game with Marlon Mack and the offensive line is doing extremely well. You pair that with a young defense that may not be experienced, but they are very, very fast and playing well. Going up against the three-headed monster on offense with the Chiefs of obviously Patrick Mahomes, Tyreek Hill, and Travis Kelce. So the Chiefs have had a week off. They've been at home this whole time, sitting and resting and preparing. This will be I think this will be one of the better games of this entire week.
I completely agree.
This one, I don't know. I think I'm going to have to go with the Chiefs. I think Patrick Mahomes will do just enough to get by. I can see this game being in the 30s, right? The Chiefs defense, we all know that they are weak and vulnerable, and that I think the Colts will have a lot of success on offense. I just think at the end, the Chiefs being able to have that extra week of rest, giving Tyreek Hill time to rest his ankle, he will be able to come back at close to, if not 100%, and they will make more big plays than the Colts will, and I think they win by a touchdown. So I think it's in the 30s, but I think the Chiefs pull off with a touchdown.
Yeah. This game is interesting. I was telling my brother because we were so ready for the NFL playoffs, and then the Colts just every offensive play worked, and I was like, dude, what's gonna happen when they play the Chiefs Swiss cheese defense? Like, I think this potentially could be Chiefs Rams, Rams Saints 2.0, 3.0, whatever you want. I think this. You said the 30s. I think this could be in the 40s. This score. I expect it to be a shootout. The Colts impressed me, like I said earlier. I think they're hitting on all cylinders right now. My old baseball coach told me it's not about who has the best team. It's about who is hottest the last. Like in the end, who's the hottest team in the playoffs. The Colts are one of the hottest teams, and obviously the Chiefs have been one of the hottest teams all season. So you have this giant big bang that's about to happen for this game. Andrew Luck leading the way, Patrick Mahomes leading the way for the Chiefs. I said that the Colts O-line is going to have a field day against the Chiefs defense. I expect, like I said, I expect this to be high scoring. But I expect, the Colts defense is good, but they're not unbelievable. They're not great. So the Chiefs' unbelievable offense will be able to score points with Tyreek Hill and others, Sammy Watkins and others, Travis Kelce. So they'll be able to score as well. I said this too because you obviously have the Chiefs' offense that is very, very dynamic. Their defense is not. It's one of the worst in the NFL. So I see this game coming down to big plays on defense from the Chiefs. Those big interceptions or maybe a fumble or stops on third down. That's how you're going to win this game because I see this game, to be honest, seeing whoever has the ball last is going to win this game. Barring another blocked or doinked field goal like Cody Parkins, I see who has the ball last is going to win this game. A lot like the Rams-Chiefs game and a lot like the Saints-Rams game. So I see this being a shootout. I think lack of playoff experience for Indianapolis besides Andrew Luck might affect them in this game. The Chiefs, besides Mahomes, do have a lot of people that have been in the playoffs before, including those defenders like Eric Berry and including that offensive line. So I am going to go and agree with you. I think the Chiefs win a tight one, high-scoring game, something like 42-38, maybe 45-42. I see them getting the ball last, their defense making enough plays to win, and Patrick Mahomes, more than likely the MVP, playing like an MVP and leading them to a victory at home. I think if this was in Indianapolis, it'd be different. But I think at Kansas City, Indianapolis having their third road game in a row, third big road game in a row, I don't think they have enough. They won't have enough steam to win. So I think Chiefs win a tight one, high-scoring game versus the Colts.
Yeah. Let's move on to my most anticipated matchup of the week, of course.
I wonder why.
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah. No reason in particular. The Cowboys traveling to L.A. to face the number 2 seed Rams, who have had a week of rest themselves as the Cowboys come off their home win against Seattle. I'll give my thoughts on this one first. I think this will be another very competitive and close game. For the majority of the season, the Rams almost looked unstoppable, right? They had a very, very tough schedule. They went up against the Chiefs. They went up against the Saints. They went up against the Eagles. I mean, they played some very, very tough matchups, right? So they are battle tested in a sense. But guess what? The Cowboys and their top-ranked rushing offense are coming into this game against, in my opinion, a very weak rush defense for the Rams. Surprisingly weak. When you see the names that are lined up, especially on the defensive line for the Rams with Ndamukong Suh and Aaron Donald and even Dante Fowler, who's really not a run stuffer, but you would think that the Rams would have a little better rush defense, and then they're very, very poor in that aspect. So I think the Cowboys definitely need to control the clock, use Elliott. He needs to get 25, 30 touches with a mixture of run and pass. And I'm very, very confident in this Cowboys defense that they can contain this Rams offense enough to get the job done. With all that being said, and this pains me to say because I'm trying to be a realistic Cowboys fan right now.
Yeah.
I think the Rams having that week off really, really will help them, especially with Todd Gurley coming into this game with that injured knee. I'm not sure he'll be 100%. I'm giving this game to the Rams. I think they win by a touchdown. I think 28-21. I think they get the ball late, drive down, and I think they have a game-winning touchdown to seal the deal. So that pains me to say because I think this Cowboys team is legitimate, and I think they have enough to have what it takes to win. But this Rams offense is still very, very scary. And like I mentioned, the fact that they had an extra week off to prepare with Sean McVay is somewhat of a scary sight to think about. So, unfortunately, I'm giving this one to the Rams.
Yeah, this is going to be a good game. The Cowboys, they did step up and beat the Seahawks, but the Seahawks are not the Rams. Okay, and the compared to the Rams offense, the Seahawks is nothing, and the Cowboys were unable to score a lot of points against the Seahawks defense, and I think they can score against the Rams. I think they can get in the 20s in points. But like I've said in the past, it depends on Dak. Ezekiel Elliott will show up. Amari Cooper will make plays. I know even though Cooper had 7 receptions for 106 yards, I actually think they need to get it to him more. Because some of those plays were big chunk plays, and they didn't consistently get it to him. And I thought that was a reason why they kept Seattle in the game. They weren't able to get that passing game 100% going. You have to have a mix, especially with a running quarterback, the RPO. You have to have run, pass, and the option of the quarterback running. And the Cowboys absolutely need to do that if they want to win. The Cowboys defense will show up. We know this. And the way they played against the Saints, where they only held the Saints to 10 points, and that front seven dominated, they need to do that to the Rams. Look at what the Bears did. Look at what the Eagles did to Jared Goff. You flustered him. Jared Goff is not that good of a quarterback. I've said this in the past. You can get Jared Goff off his game when, Sean McVay hasn't developed a clear play for him, right? When he has to scramble, it's over. Because he's getting play calls from Sean McVay 15 seconds up until the play starts. So he's not even ready to go. So the defense definitely, I think, has the advantage in this game as far as Dallas goes. The Rams defense needs to play better. They haven't played better. The Eagles have started to get up. We saw Marcus Peters go into the stands. We've seen, a couple guys not play well. So I think their defense needs to step up. The Rams need to rely on Todd Gurley and put in C.J. Anderson when needed, but C.J. Anderson has been solid. Here's another interesting thing about this. The Rams, this is their first tough game in 3 weeks. They've essentially had 3 weeks off. They played the Cardinals, they played the 49ers, and then they get a week off. So they haven't had a tough game since their 2 losses in a row to the Bears and Eagles. So they are not coming into this game with momentum. Dallas does. With all that said, I do think that the Rams just have a better roster in general, and I agree with you. I think they're going to win by a touchdown or possibly more if there's mistakes made by Dak or fumbles. I do think the Rams will win this game. But it's going to be closer, and I don't think it's going to be a blowout. I don't believe that. Dallas' defense is too good for it to be a blowout. And unless Dak just completely craps the bed in this game, I see this being a touchdown game. And the Cowboys will have a chance, but I think ultimately I will predict that the Rams will win.
Yeah. One last thing that I want to say, because we've all been kind of hyping up this defense, and they've been playing very well, and I think they will continue to play well. And I think one of the biggest factors going into this game that bodes well for the Cowboys, the Rams are not a tough kind of pounded out, type of offense, right? They like to spread the ball out. And yes, obviously Todd Gurley will get involved, but they are a space type of team. They have speed on offense, and they like to utilize that speed. Well, guess what? The Cowboys have that same type of speed at all 3 levels. With their defensive line, they move around. Like, their defensive line does not just stop because a pass has been thrown. Their defensive line runs to the ball on every single play. We know about their linebackers. I've already talked about them. I think they're the best young linebacking duo in the league, and they are fast. They run sideline to sideline. Their secondary is young as well, and while they're a little inexperienced and many people may not know about their players in the secondary, they are also fast and they can cover ground. So I think that speed on defense will be able to match the speed and the tempo and the type of things that the Rams want to do on offense. So, if the Cowboys were going up against more of a ground and pound team like Seattle last week, they showed that they can do that as well. But I think if you want to try to have speed and play that type of game against Cowboys defense, that team will be up to the task. So, like I said, a tough game, but I think you and I both agree. I think the Rams might just have a little more edge.
Yeah, but the Cowboys have a chance because if Dak steps up, that puts an element that I don't think we're both predicting in this case. If Dak just throws for 400 yards and gets Amari Cooper in the game and throws to the tight ends and gets Ezekiel Elliott in the game, the Cowboys could win the game, to be honest, easy, because Jared Goff is not trustworthy enough. And I think that Cooper Kupp injury earlier this year definitely decimated the offense enough to where they're beatable now. And we've seen that now with the Bears and Eagles. And we've seen the defensive strategy to stop the Rams. The Cowboys just need to implement that and get that in. So Cowboys have a chance, but I'm not going to predict they win. I think the Rams win. All right, moving on to the other LA team. The LA Chargers are going to be visiting the New England Patriots in Foxborough. This is a very interesting matchup because obviously you have the Chargers getting through the Ravens and having one of the best years. They're technically the second seed. They actually have a better record, I believe, than the New England Patriots, correct? So they're coming into the game as a road team with a better record.
The Patriots are 11-6. Yeah, you're right. Yeah. And the Chargers are 12-4.
So the Chargers technically are a better team coming into this game. I'm going to throw these facts out there before we get a predictions. The Chargers are undefeated on the road outside of Los Angeles. Okay, so outside of the city of Los Angeles, the Chargers are undefeated. Okay, that would apply to New England. They haven't beat them this year, but they are undefeated. Patriots are undefeated at home. So we have a little bit of a stalemate here as far as that goes. I'll give my prediction on this first. I'm going to just say this outright. I think Patriots win a close game. And so I'm just not going to go against the Patriots if they're undefeated at home. They're going to find a way to win. The Patriots will show up? Obviously, they lose Josh Gordon. Gronk is a bit injured. Edelman's not up to par, and Chris Hogan has disappeared. Okay, so they're not the same offense that they were last year and even the last couple of years. In order for the Chargers to win this game, you have to keep Tom Brady off the field. One of the reasons the Cowboys beat the Seahawks is because they kept Russell Wilson off the field in the biggest moments of the game. I think they need to keep Tom Brady off the field. They need to use the clock like they did against Baltimore and use that possibly DB-heavy defense again because, if you can stop Lamar Jackson and speedy receivers like Willie Snead and John Brown, why can't you stop these old, slow guys for the New England Patriots, right? So I see that as an advantage. I think if Melvin Ingram and Joey Bosa can dominate the line of scrimmage and possibly a returning Brandon Mebane, they could stop this New England offense. And they have to take advantage of every single scoring opportunity they can. They have to be like Clemson. If Tom Brady were to throw an interception or turn the ball over or someone fumbles, they need to score. They can't punt the ball away or miss a field goal. You have to score against New England. With all that said, they also get Hunter Henry off the PUP list. I don't know if he's going to play or be activated, but he is on the roster, so he will play potentially in these playoffs if they keep going. With all that said, though, I'm not going to go against Tom Brady and the Patriots in a home game against a team like in the Chargers and in a quarterback, Philip Rivers, who usually hasn't won the biggest game. So I'm going to go Tom Brady as a safe pick, Patriots in a close, low-scoring game.
This game in New England on Sunday will be played most likely in the snow in frigid temperatures.
Oh, my goodness.
Last time I checked, the Chargers play in L.A., and I don't think they played in snow in a very long time, right?
Yeah.
Now, some of their players are probably used to it from their college days or their other NFL stops that they've made, but the fact that the weather will play a major role in this game, along with another fact that you give Bill Belichick and Tom Brady 2 weeks to prepare for you, they're almost unbeatable. And I say almost because obviously they lost in last year's Super Bowl to the Eagles and they had 2 weeks to prepare. But generally, when you give these guys enough time to prepare, they come up with schemes and things that you have never seen before.
Yeah.
So the Chargers are coming in obviously on a very hot streak. And like you mentioned, away from LA, they're undefeated. But I said this going into the playoffs that the Patriots, and I think in order for them to succeed in this postseason, they needed to get home field advantage, which is exactly what they did. Because when they're at home, regardless of the weather situation, they just seem to play better and they're more comfortable. So I can't go against Tom Brady and Bill Belichick with the rest that they've had and the time to prepare and the fact that they're at home. I think this will be a good game up until the fourth quarter. I think the Patriots win by 10, 31-21.
Oh, wow. Okay,
so I think they pull away a little bit in the fourth quarter. I think for the most part it's a close game, but I can't go away from Tom Brady and Bill Belichick with all that rest time.
No, and at home undefeated, and the Chargers, they struggle a little bit against the Ravens. You can't, like I said, you have to play perfect to beat the Patriots. If they play perfect, they can win. I think it's going to be a close, low-scoring game. In the snow, stuff could happen. But I'm not going to go against the Patriots. I'm not going to put my money on the Chargers. Let's just say that. All right, moving on to the last game. We have exactly 5 minutes left in the podcast. Perfect timing. The 6th seed Eagles versus the number 1 seed New Orleans Saints. The Eagles escape Chicago with a win. The Saints have been waiting. Their offense hasn't been the offense that we're used to the last couple weeks of the regular season, but we expect them to be ready to go. Jared, I'll let you take this away. What do you think happens in this game? Who do you think wins?
Yeah, this one, is kind of interesting because if you look back to earlier in the season, I believe it was like week 10 or week 11, the Eagles traveled to New Orleans, and New Orleans whooped them. And I mean absolutely dominated from the word go. I would also like to mention that Carson Wentz was the starting quarterback for the Eagles in that game, and he looked awful.
It's a
he
big
threw,
factor,
I think,
though.
2 or 3 interceptions in that game. So now you have Nick Foles, who hasn't necessarily gone up against this defense or this team, but to play in that Superdome with that crowd noise, I think is probably one of the toughest stadiums to play in, other than maybe the Chiefs in Arrowhead and probably Seattle with 12th man. I think that will be too much to overcome for this Eagles team. Listen, the Eagles squeaked into the playoffs, right, by the skin of their teeth with a win and much needed help by the Bears. And then they squeaked out a win against the Bears, who came within inches of making a field goal that doinked off the goalpost. I don't think there's any way the Eagles squeak by the Saints this week. Like I said, the Saints are another team that, because they played so well in the regular season, were awarded a bye. They got to, they've been at home for the last couple weeks. That Drew Brees and Sean Payton will be ready, just like the Patriots. They kind of have that same mentality as far as scheming-wise goes. I think the Saints win this game pretty handedly. Now, the Eagles' defense their front seven is good, and if the Eagles want any way of staying in this game, they have to disrupt Drew Brees. Yeah. If you let Drew Brees have a free pocket, I don't think this game is close at all. So I think this is probably the one game out of the 4 that could potentially get away from a team and become somewhat of a blowout.
Yeah, no, Jared, I completely agree. Interesting, just to give Philadelphia some credit, they faced Aaron Donald, J.J. Watt, and Khalil Mack in the last 4 games, and those guys have 0 sacks. So obviously their blocking scheme against star players is good. I don't think the Saints have anybody of that caliber, so you don't have to worry about that as much.
I mean, Cameron Jordan is a very good defender.
He's good, but they'll have a scheme to stop him. So I think that the front line, the defensive line is stopped. These DBs, though, they played the game of their life, or at least tried to against the Bears. I don't think that happens again. You can't stop the Saints. Nick Foles he cannot make the same mistakes he did against Chicago, or you're right, this game is going to turn into a horrible blowout. Saints defense needs to contain the rushing game, like Chicago did. I believe the Eagles' top rusher last game was Darren Sproles at 21 yards. So eliminate the RPO threat. You make Nick Foles throw the ball the whole time, you're not going to be successful. Drew Brees and Sean Payton are 5-0 at home in playoff history. There's another stat. Yeah, Saints win by at least 2 possessions in this game, whether that be by 9, 16, or 40. I think this is probably my game in my pick'em where I put the most stake on. I think the Saints win this one easy. I agree with you. Nick Foles, this offense is just not the same as the Super Bowl year, and they're not going to be able to do the same things they did. So I think I got Saints, Patriots, Rams, and Chiefs. So I think we actually picked the same teams this week, the exact opposite of last week. These were a little easier. These top teams were the top teams all year. So it makes sense now that they're going to be in there. And even like you look at the Patriots and Chargers game, I think Chargers were probably that 5th team. So you have the 5 best teams in the NFL still there, but I think the top 4 will end up winning these games. Next round will be a little more interesting, but nonetheless, I think that is what's going to happen here in the divisional round. All right, there you go. You hear the music right there. Jared, great podcast. A lot to talk about. I'll post a lot about this stuff. I'll post our predictions, within the day or 2 before the games happen and stuff like that, just to make sure you guys know if you're not able to listen to the podcast this week. But yeah, solid podcast. Next week, we'll be talking about the divisional round and talking about the championship games. So for Nick Meenan,
I'm Jared Smith.
This has been the Cover 2.